realize that the topic desire, understanding the will of man, is not the greatest nail biter that I could have chosen, but I do believe that it is one of the best topics that I could have chosen following what happened on Tuesday, because it stands in stark contrast to what's going on out there. Rather than feeding us like animals, where we are at the table of the next news tidbit that comes across, we need to be forming ourselves to understand who we are as made in the image and likeness of God. And here we'll have an opportunity to reflect upon human nature as we've done in the past, upon this gift of our will by which we can desire the greatest things, and that we can begin once again to follow our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Our speaker this evening received his bachelor's in philosophy from Regis University in Denver, Colorado, and pursued graduate studies in Rome at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, the Angelicum, where he obtained a bachelor's in philosophy and a licentiate in philosophy, and where he is now completing his Ph.D. Did you finish?
It's written and completed and approved. We just need everyone to be in Rome together. And it may happen, I say 80%. I'm thinking, but in February it looks
By
like.
February, okay, all right.
So we're getting, I just got back from Rome today, but that was to do business for that and some.
Not just today, Professor Wunsch flew in at 4 o'clock this afternoon from Rome to be with us. He has spoken widely, lectured on a variety of topics, including the relationship between faith and reason, the connection between philosophy and history, and the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. I will not vouch with the little sleep he got for what he will be saying tonight, but let's all wish him good luck. And please join me in welcoming Professor Mark Wunsch.
Very true. Very true. Oh, how's it going? Yeah. I'm glad it's not vouching for it, because I prepared a different talk this evening. I prepared a very different talk. I'm going to talk about the different kinds of coffee, different distinctions between cappuccini, cafe latte, and why what Starbucks calls the the caramel macchiato does not make any sense. Okay. It's a topic dear to my heart, okay, but I think I will take up Deacon Sabatino's invitation and speak to you about the will, okay? And so I appreciate being here. If I may even offer my 2 cents, I appreciate what Deacon Sabatino had to say about the present situation in our country. I'm not going to expound upon that profoundly, but I was in Rome as the news came in that there's certain challenges that now seem to be quite imminent that face all of us in some very, very ways that hit us very close to home. And I was pondering this as I went on a tour of the Vatican museums with Dr. Elizabeth Lev, a fabulous tour guide, and also professor for Christendom's Rome program, and also for other Rome programs of other institutions abroad, and an author and speaker. And we were having a conversation the day of the election, and we were processing, and I'll call it that, and yet we always don't. We have to find hope. Okay, we have to find hope, and so what I drew some consolation from is this: is that Christ saved the world. Okay, Christ saved the world. Okay, that battle is won. Okay, it's not that more battles have to be fought, but the ultimate victory has been won and has been claimed by Him. And so, what is our responsibility? I feel, do I need to do everything? And the answer that we came up with is that I have to be holy. I have to be holy. I have to love God. Okay, I have to love my family, and I have to be excellent at what God made me to do. Okay? We each have our role to fill in the body of Christ, a role that can be filled by no other, and our job is to fill it. Okay, and so my friend, Professor Love, said that she's going to go out and try to give a really good tour of the Vatican museums today. She's going to try to be a good art historian, to communicate about this transcendental beauty, to communicate about the rich patrimony and culture of our church to the next generation. Okay, and she's going to try to do that and raise her family well. Okay, and so that's also what I'm going to try to do. And, you know, we can dabble in things in our free time insofar as we're able. But remember, you know, Christ did a lot investing his time into the lives of 12 men. Okay, he did other things too. I know he did a lot of other things too, and he cured a bunch of people and preached the gospel all over the place. But principally, it seems like he invested his time and energy into the lives of 12 men. And the qualitative effect of the depth of what he gave them bore fruit that's just almost immeasurable. Okay, those small seeds, okay, were well fertilized and changed the world. And so there's always hope. Okay, and I think it, you know, Christ called in, I think, Luke's gospel, his flock, his small flock. Okay, and a small purified flock, all doing their part, living radically the call that God has asked of them, can do much. Okay, and so thanks for letting me sermonize for a minute. But those are the words of consolation that I came to with a friend of mine, and I offer them to you for what it's worth, my own 2 cents. Now, this evening, I would like to discuss with you the will, the rational appetite of man, our rational desiring. Now, I'd like to put this, though, in a context. Man is made to order. The intelligent man, the wise man, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, according to Aristotle, is the man who orders. Okay, so I'd like to give an ordered reflection on man, and then so that we could find the context for where this will belongs, this rational appetite. Okay, so I'll spend time providing this ordered reflection of man and building in a kind of crescendo form to a more specific treatment of the will, man's rational appetite. So again, we'll begin with a reflection upon man in general. Now, why does it matter, a philosophy of man? And let me suggest something at the outset. I don't have a long time to talk to you tonight. Obviously, many of the themes I'll have to discuss, I'll have to do so in partial form. You can always expand the outline. You can always go into more detail. But I'll try to go into enough breadth and depth that you're able to see something of what especially thinkers like Aristotle and St. Thomas had to say about who man is. And then, you know, in your own time, maybe you can even spend reading yourself and encountering the thought of St. Thomas and others on these same themes. So beginning then with the philosophy of man, okay, and why the philosophy of man matters, okay. Now, it was said by someone who was writing a review of a book I recently read, that the great atrocities of the 20th century were born in the cafes of Vienna and Paris. Okay? That there are horrible atrocities committed against mankind, okay? On a scale that was just unprecedented. Now, when we look for explanations, we can find a lot of them. But certainly, I think we have to look into what allowed man to treat his neighbor as an object, as something that's dispensable. Okay? There has to be a change in ideology, okay, that would lead one to treat man as an object, okay, as something that's dispensable. We dispose of food, we dispose of paper plates, but man was disposed of, okay, you know, in all across the world, you know, from Cambodia to Russia, to Auschwitz, we found man being treated as an animal, man being treated as an object, as a means to someone else's end, and not as an end in and of himself. Now, how can we explain this? Well, I'm going to offer that part of the explanation comes from the way man came to be seen in the 19th century. Okay? And without getting into the history of modern philosophy, which is a topic I've discussed, I think, at another one of these lectures that I was invited to, I will simply say that there are a variety and a host of thinkers who in the 19th century came to see man as no more than a body, okay, or an animal, or at best a complex animal. And when your philosophy of man is such, the way you're going to treat man will be accordingly, okay? And so what are the options? It seems almost trite. I remember talking to my brother-in-law, he's a medical doctor, and he said, well, why do you guys spend so much time talking about terms in philosophy? Man is man. What's the deal? And I'm like, well, it's a big deal because not everyone agrees about who man is, okay? And so there's three general theses about who man is, three, I think, distinct possibilities. One would be that man doesn't start with S. Man is a soul, okay? Man is a soul. Another distinct thesis would be that man is a body. And then the kind of halfway house, if you will, maybe even better put, the mean between these extreme positions would be the position that man is a body, soul composite. It'll be my position, okay, and the philosophy of Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas at least, argue for the position that man is a body-soul composite. Now, I think we can just see, okay, how our reflection on man would be different if we were to assent to the position that man is just a body. Think about how that would change how one would treat man. If man was just a body, there was no immortal soul, okay? How would that affect the way you viewed man? What would distinguish him from an animal? Okay? Could we distinguish him from an animal? Okay? These are questions I would like you to think about, to ponder. Okay? Now, the other position that man is a soul. Okay? Now, this position has been advocated by a variety of thinkers through the history of philosophy. Plato even seemed to hint at it to some extent in his thought. Even Augustine, although his position was significantly more nuanced, hinted at this position. Descartes, in the modern era, very much would assent to this position. That man is a soul, simply making use of the body. Okay? They would make that position. Okay? And I ask you to ponder how that would affect the way we treat our bodies. Okay? There are a variety of thinkers who still hold to this kind of dualism. That man is a soul, the body is a separate substance that is peculiarly united to the soul. Okay? Now that's another position that's advocated. Now what I'm going to do tonight is not to go into these three different visions of man in great detail, but I'd like you to think at your leisure about how the story would be different if man is not, okay, what Aristotle and Thomas says he is, a body-soul composite. A body which is an essential part of who we are. Okay, if man is just a soul, he can be indiscriminately, his soul, put into another body. Okay, Plato would advocate a thesis of the transmigration of souls, a theory of reincarnation, that the soul could come into other bodies and you would still be you to some extent. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't like the idea of myself being put into, no offense, a female body. I mean, I feel like I'm missing, I'm not quite myself, you know. If I was put in the body of, I don't know, a wombat, okay, I would feel less of myself, okay. And this speaks, though, okay, I speak in jest to some extent, but it speaks to something that's profound. That the body, your body, is not accidental. It's not like your car, okay? Sometimes we speak of our car as if it's part of ourselves. I got in a wreck on the way to work. And listen to that language. I got in a wreck on the way to work. It's not me, okay? It's my car, okay? I got in a wreck on the way. You know, I mean, if I got in a wreck, it'd be different, okay? If I was injured and my car is injured. Well, it's interesting. In studying the history of philosophy, you study the thought of Descartes, and he sounds like that. That when he says, I weigh 35 pounds, he's talking about his body. And when he says, I know, I understand, he's talking about himself, the soul. Okay, and so the body and the soul are two very distinct things. Whereas for another person who says, I weigh 35 pounds and I know that 2 + 2 is 4, I'm speaking of myself in both cases. But not so for every philosopher. Okay, so you have to understand, okay, where people are coming from. Okay, now certainly, if you would, you think of individuals who would advocate the thesis that man is just a body. There's some forms of the Marxist, for instance, Marxist ideology, certainly would advocate that man is nothing more than a body. I mean, the thesis goes as back to ancient Greece, Democritus, who Marx wrote his thesis upon. A pre-Socratic philosopher would hold this position. And there's a host of others, in particular in the modern world, that would advocate this position. Okay, so I just want you to see initially, okay, the relevance of asking, who am I? Okay, now that is who are we in a general sense. And again, Aristotle admonishes us to know thyself. So I'm going to present tonight a way to know thyself in an Aristotelian fashion, okay, or Thomistic fashion. And that's what I'll dedicate the rest of my time to, is to provide an ordered way to know who we are collectively, okay, as members of the same species. Okay. So now the next point then, my first was introduction. Okay, these introductory notes. Sorry if I keep brushing this. In fact, would this help if I remove? No, it doesn't help. But I'll remove it anyway. Does that help, do you think? Do you think I might say, I keep brushing them. Okay. Whoa. Or, all right, yeah. Yeah, that's the 15 minutes of sleep talking right there. Yeah. Yeah. Whew. Okay, good. Probably caught that on video. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Now, if that's as bad as it gets, actually, I'm fine. You know, I'm fine. All right. Okay, so that was our introduction. Okay, who is man? Okay, we can title our introduction, Who is Man? Okay. Now we're going to begin an ordered reflection on man we have to choose some framework, okay? And I think there's good reason to choose Aristotelian Thomistic framework. And so that's what we're going to select this evening. Now St. Thomas says we begin by making the most general observations. And slowly we become more specific as we look at whatever we are inquiring into. And so we begin with reflection on man as natural. Okay, so man as natural. Okay. Sorry, this is quasi-legible. I know what my students go through. Okay. Man as natural. So Thomas says, let's take the most basic generalizations we can make about man. And the first is that man is natural. Okay, now what does natural mean? Well, he's not supernatural, okay? That begins to hint at it. He's not above nature. So what is it then that all natural things, all things in nature have in common? And it's that he's material and mutable. He's changeable, okay? He's material and he is changeable. And from this perspective, man is like a rock. Man is like water. Man is like a plant, and man is like an animal, okay? He is part of the natural world, okay? And we can begin there with the most basic generalization. Now, all natural things for Aristotle are composed of form and matter, okay? And we'll have to have a class on natural philosophy to get into all the ins and outs of this. But basically, form provides him with stability. It gives to him a nature. It makes him to be what he is. To be a man and not a cat. To be a man and not a chimpanzee or a palm tree. Okay? But all natural things also have a principle of change. Okay? It was one of the observations of Aristotle of the natural world that hardwired into every contingent thing are principles of stability and change. Things both have this, they fight to preserve themselves. Okay? I mean, even from a contemporary physics perspective, you can speak of different forces that you could incorporate into this discussion that speak to the desire, if you will, of matter to be stable. But it's also changing. He didn't agree with Parmenides that there's no change. Certainly things change, and so they also have a material principle which is likened to a potency to change. So the form gives man stability and his nature, which is stable. Just to speak about this briefly, you know, like when I get my hair cut, I am different, but I am still a man. Okay? There's something that is holding me together. In fact, it's the same thing that's been holding me together since conception and making me to be who I am. It's my form, or in this case, the form of a living thing. It's called a soul that is making me to be what I am, okay? Giving to me a stable identity. And yet, I have a potency for change. And this is a part of the natural world. God doesn't change. But material things, natural things, do change. Okay, so man has that in common with all natural things, and that goes for us. We belong in this world. And yet, we have a unique principle or soul, as we'll speak about, that is both in the world but not of the world, I guess you can say, and to put it very loosely. But now let's move on and try to become more and more specific. Man is not just natural like a rock, but he's more exciting than a rock. He's living. He's alive. He's alive. So are plants, though. Okay? And so we have to look at what makes man and plants and animals different. And what makes them different is they are alive. But what does that mean, to be alive? Well, it means that they are self-movers. A rock doesn't move itself. You can kick it. You can throw it through a window. It can do damage. but it doesn't throw itself. It doesn't move itself. The principle or the origin of its movement does not come from within, it comes from without. But given the right nourishment, given the right nutrients, living things move themselves. Plants grow. Plants are nourished. Okay? Plants can even reproduce. They can act on their own given the right conditions. Okay? And this is, again, a way in which, as we move up this hierarchy of living things, the things begin to resemble even God more and more. We say that God is supremely alive. Okay? And we see, as we move up this hierarchy, how these things participate in greater and greater ways in what it means to fully be alive. Now, freedom is one of those things, okay, that we have in common with God that makes us most like him, and we're getting there, okay? But now we also see that man has organic parts, okay? That distinguishes him as well. You look at a natural thing, even water. You break up water, pour it into different cups, and they're homogeneous parts. They're all the same. But with living things, you have parts that are different. They perform different functions, but they all serve the whole. These are characteristics of living things. And so they have, again, an ability to act. Now, what do we call this ability to act? Okay, we're getting to a foundation for our discussion of the will, because the will is one of these. It's a power, or faculty of man. It's a power that gives us an ability to do something. Okay, that's what powers do. It gives us an ability to act. And when do we know, and how do we know how many powers something has? Well, when we see it acting in a certain way, and then seeing it acting in another way, we say, ooh, it has another power. Okay, we see that I see something. Okay, you come across some mysterious animal or thing, we'll call it a thing. And all of a sudden, ooh, it's self-moving. It has a power of self-moving, okay? And then as you kind of move over to the side and it follows you, like it can see. It is a power to see. And then if you move and you see it responding, it has a power of hearing. It's acting in different ways, and its seeing is not its hearing, so it has distinct powers. So powers give to things abilities to act. We say that all living things have three fundamental general powers, and we call them vegetative powers. We speak of nutrition, growth, and reproduction as the most basic powers that pertain to living being. We speak of man as living. But now let's move forward. We're working up the food chain very rapidly here. Let's speak of man as sentient, okay? And this is a way in which man and animals are different from plants. How are they different? Okay, well, what is that difference? Well, if we could try to get at it exactly, well, it would be something like this, okay? What do they do that plants do not do? Now, plants can receive water, okay? But when you bring food to your animal knows the food's coming. And it even desires it in a way, okay? And so we're moving into certain other powers that are higher. And so let's speak of them. And so as we speak of man as sentient, let me distinguish two general kinds of powers now that apply to all sentient beings. Those are powers of cognition and powers of appetite, okay? Powers of cognition and powers of appetite. Powers of cognition allow us to know. Powers of appetite, generically, allow us to desire, to be moved by what we know. Because it's one thing for me to sense, okay, to sense the coffee. when it's brewing. It's another thing to desire it. Agreed? Okay, it's one thing to know it, another thing to want it. In my knowing is not my wanting, although they're related in important ways, are they not? Well, the important way is that you can't desire anything you don't know. Okay, so apprehension or cognition precedes appetite. Okay, and they're very closely related. Now, this is exciting. And these are questions you just might not have thought about, because I have nothing better to do with my time. I do think about these things. Yeah. I know you guys all have important things to do and money to make, and I just like to think about this stuff here. So, what is happening? Okay, in cognition. Okay. What is going on when I smell the coffee? When I see my friend coming around the corner? When I know, again, even 2 + 2 is 4, okay? Loosely, we can even put this under the same heading. I'm going to say reality, as it exists outside of me, is somehow getting in here. Reality as it exists outside of me is coming to exist in a cognitional way, a different way, in me. Okay, that's kind of what's going on. When I see the hospital, you drive by the hospital. The hospital, and I know the hospital's over there. I don't grab it and stuff it in. The hospital's in here, but I know it. And so with cognition, okay, reality as it exists, I might even subject you to my drawings of cats here. Why not? Yeah. It's late. Yeah, I've been up late. Yes. Not bad, huh? Not bad at all. Not bad. I spend less time working on the body here. Yeah. There it is. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Grazie. Sì, si chiama Maffeo. Yeah, that's Maffeo, the cat. If anyone gets big time extra credit points if they can identify who Maffeo is named after. Maffeo is Pope Urban VIII. It was Maffeo Barberini. And I draw this cat from time to time. And he was a great patron of the arts. And so we went through the Vatican Museum seeing images of Maffeo. And I even sat in on a student presentation. They didn't know I was going to be there. And they're speaking about Maffeo Barberini in some context. I can't remember what it was. And they put up in their little slide PowerPoint presentation a picture of a cat with a cardinal's hat on. Anyway, there's Maffeo. I give him to you. By the way, I ripped the name off from another professor of mine who drew cats. So he's living on in my own work here. Pass the torch to the next generation. Yeah. Some child out there will be drawing cats years from now. Yeah, well, hopefully they'll be doing more than just drawing cats. But anyway, so what's happening? Okay, what's happening? Well, when I sense the cat, okay, the cat is in me. Okay, no, this is just basic. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, you get the idea. The cat is in me. Okay, the cat comes to be in a different way. Okay, it comes to be intentionally, it's called. But what that means is simply there is a movement going on. Reality as it exists outside of us is coming to exist inside of us. Now, to anticipate, okay, this is just sense knowledge, but the same principles apply to cognition at the level of intellectual knowing. But this is why we say truth is in the intellect, and goodness is in things. But truth is in the intellect, and goodness is in things. It's in the intellect because it means reality is coming to be in me. Okay? Now, what happens, okay, with appetite? So cognition involves reality as it exists outside of me, coming to exist in me in a cognitional way, by way of a representation. I receive a likeness of what is external to me. Okay? Now, on the basis of cognition, what can I then do? I can then be moved in a different way to things as they exist in themselves. So the movement with cognition is of things as they exist in themselves to things as they exist in me in this alternative form. But on the basis of my knowing the cat, I'm then able to love the cat and pet his fur, okay? So because you know the cat, you can then, okay, be moved by him. The being moved by him is a movement of appetite, okay, is a movement of appetite. It's a movement that follows upon cognition. It presupposes it. But it's a different kind of movement. In one case, reality as it exists outside of me is coming to exist in me in a cognitional fashion. And with appetite, I am being moved to things. Now, why am I moved to things? Remember, truth is in the intellect, and goodness is in things. I'm moved to things because they are good. Okay, that means they are desirable. They are able to elicit my desire when known by a being who has that power. The plant will never desire anything. But animals, in a very basic way, are able to desire, and we'll talk about how their desiring is different from ours, it's very important, because they have the power to be moved by what they know. Okay? And also to be moved away from that. If it's a dangerous cat, you might have a power to be moved away. Okay. Now, so cognition and appetite. Hopefully we get the basic distinction there. Okay. Now we have a variety of powers of sense cognition. Okay. We have a variety of powers. We have 5 external senses. Okay. That's where reality comes to be in me initially. Okay, and Aristotle will say there is nothing in the mind that wasn't first in the senses. They are the gateways, if you will. They're the entrance points of reality into me. And this is what Aristotle meant with this famous phrase, that man is in potential to become all things. What on earth is he talking about? That we turn into stuff, we turn into cows and cats? No, but cats come to be in me. Everything can come to be in me, okay? And it's the great dignity of man that all things that exist in the world as separate can come once again to exist in a united fashion in a single place, in the mind of man. And so I'm in potency to know all things, and that's what he meant by saying that man is the potency to become all things, because he can become them all cognitionally. Okay? And that's a great dignity. Now, animals can become particular things cognitionally. They can know particular things by way of their 5 external senses. But are those the only sense powers we have? We have to look at that. Does that explain all the actions of knowing of an animal? And the answer is no. Why? Because they don't just sense other things. They are able to collate and collect what they know. Okay? Because think about it. If your eye just knew color and your ear just heard sound, well then all that knowledge would be separate. There has to be a way to bring it together, to organize it. Okay, and they speak, Aristotle and Thomas, of the common sense, which isn't common sense in the way you're used to using the term. But it's a common sense. It's the first of the interior senses that we could even speak of as being housed in the brain, okay, where they bring together all of the data of our external senses. And then we can know not just orange, what I see of the cat, not just soft, not just meowing, meow, you know, that's my meow. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But the orange, meowing, soft thing. We know we're able to collate, to collect, to organize, to gather, and to form what is called a phantasm, a representation of the particular material thing, replete with all of its sensible characteristics. Okay? And that is something even animals can do, right? Now, what else can they do? They can retain that knowledge. They have something of a memory, right? Or we call it an imagination even, okay? Or memory. They can retain what they know, okay? That is something they're able to do, okay? And man's able to do these things too. And it becomes more complicated. If I had more time, I'd get into the different internal senses, but we'll leave it at that. Now, they also have the ability to be moved by what they know. And the movement then of their appetite, the movement of their sense appetite. So under this heading, I could do a big tree diagram, but I'm running out of space. We have sense cognition divided into 5 external senses. There's technically 4 internal senses: common sense, imagination, something called the estimative sense. I just don't have time to get into all this. You can, I can refer you to other material. And then there's the memory. The estimative sense in man becomes the cogitative sense. But we're not going to get into all those particulars because we're supposed to be talking about the will today, and I haven't even gotten there. Anyway, but I have 15 minutes. So this is good. This is good. Yeah, well, this is all fine and dandy. Okay, very good. So there we are. Okay, so now we're moving into sense appetite. So sense appetite will be the response to what we know. And animals certainly can know things. By the way, the estimative sense is not just knowledge of things, but knowledge of them is harmful or helpful. And that's kind of the highest knowledge animals have. And think about it. It's expressed by what they talk about. I mean, I'm thinking when maybe all the Disney's right, and they're having all these great conversations. I mean, Nemo was on the plane, and the animals seem to be having these great conversations. But I think usually, like the Far Side, I mean, it's all funny because animals don't do that, you know. And that's what we recognize, the discontinuity there, and we find that funny. I think normally they just, help, or go get that, or let's go. I mean, it's like it's you know, let's go get something. Let's get away from something. Let's maul that thing. Let's move away. I mean, that's kind of what they're talking about. And so what they talk about is based on what they know. Things is harmful or helpful. It's kind of the highest knowledge that they have, right? And then their appetite is their movement in response to that. And it's associated with the passions or emotions. Okay, our emotions, okay, they're responses to what we have sensed. We have different emotional responses. I could get into more distinctions there. There's different kinds of passions and emotions. But, okay, and with man, they can come under the influence of a higher appetite, which we're now on the verge of discussing. Okay, as we move to man as rational. That's rational. Man is rational. Okay. Now, does man do something an animal does not do? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. To see, are there powers that belong to him that do not belong to animals? If we can say yes, then we can say man is different. We can know through his actions, because actions reveal the nature of a thing, that he is different. And so let's take a look and see whether man is different? Is there a knowing of man that is higher than that of an animal? And is there a desiring of man that is higher and different than the desiring of an animal? Okay, let's take a look at that question. And maybe I'll begin just with a kind of an interesting thing that might illuminate this. Do beavers always make, what do they make? Dams. Good. Just making sure. Do beavers always make their dams the same way? Does man always make his home the same way? Why? Why is the question. Is there a higher kind of knowledge that man has that allows him to act, to have a diversity of responses, or at least a possibility to act differently in a variety of ways? Well, think about this. Maybe what the animal has in mind for a home is a particular image. A particular image represents a particular material thing. And maybe that's its knowledge. But maybe man can have an idea of a home universally that is not particular, but universal. Okay? Maybe man can know what a home is as universal, and not just have a single particular image, but he can know what a home is and see how something made out of adobe, how something made out of clay, out of bricks, out of wood, it's made in a variety of ways, a variety of sizes, how all of these particulars fit under the universal idea of home. So what is that kind of knowledge that man has that's different? Well, think also about his conversation that's different than the conversation of animals. Now, sometimes I think the students in our dorms have conversations that don't really go very far above this. I'm just speculating. Go get that. Run away. You know, like I don't know. Just judging by some of their output on Monday mornings, you know, there's not a lot. But actually, we also have a debate society at our school, and I'm thinking that, you know, they talk. What is the best form of government? I mean, I don't think a lot of birds get together and say, hey, stop flying around for a minute, okay? What's the best form of government? Have you pondered this? Have you given that? I don't think it happens. Why? There's a higher kind of knowing. It's called universal knowledge. Man is somehow able to move from particulars to universals. Universals we can think of in terms as common nouns. We don't just know this dog or Garfield or Maffeo, but we know cat and dog. We're able to take what is common in a variety of particulars. We're able to focus on what they hold in common or what makes them to be what they are. Okay, apart from other individuating accidental distinctions and differences. And so with this higher form of knowing comes what? A higher form of desiring. Now, we can know particulars by way of our senses. And on the basis of knowing particulars, we can desire particulars. But guess what we get to desire because we can know universally? Okay, again, we can know particular goods. The good of the food to eat for the cat. But with the universal knowledge, what can we know that exceeds particular goodness? We can know goodness generally, goodness universally. not just particular goods, but we can know goodness universally. In fact, we desire goodness universally. That is unrestricted goodness. We desire the complete, perfect good. And that is something that all men agree upon. And this is one of the most fascinating aspects now of our will. Our intellect knows truth universally. Our will can desire goodness universally. And also is able to deliberate, okay, something animals cannot do. It has freedom. We'll talk about that in a moment. That allows us to decide and to deliberate and then to choose between two different goods. Okay? But one of these characteristics of our will, before we talk about our will as free, I want to speak about this, how our will is determined. How there's a way in which our will is determined. And what would that be? Well, if there's something everybody wills necessarily, then our will is determined. And what is it that everybody wills necessarily? Happiness. We all will happiness necessarily. I mean, no matter how, what people say, okay, well, I don't want, I'm just doing this for that. If you keep saying, well, why are you doing that? Why are you at the Institute of Catholic Culture? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Eventually, they come up with, well, ultimately, it's to be happy. And so we have an ultimate good, okay, that we desire. This ultimate good, well, is ultimately the thing we all desire universally is happiness. And what this does is it now okay, let's say that though. Now what do we know our happiness to be found in? God. Now, do you think we all will God necessarily? Not consciously. That's a good distinction. It's a very, 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 very good distinction. And we know this because we talk to people, and they say they don't will God. Now, in some way they do, because in willing their happiness, they desire their happiness can only be found in a complete good. And God is goodness completely. And so, even though they don't know it, they do seek for their happiness in God. But Thomas says it's like this. It's like when you see someone coming around the corner. You know someone is there, but you don't know yet that it's Paul. That is how our will is ordered to our end. We know that it's in a perfect good that will make us perfectly happy, but we don't know in what good that consists, that it's in God. And that has to be proven, and can be proven rationally, and has been revealed by faith that God is the answer. And because we need that answer early in life, God was good enough to give us the answer right away. But even philosophy can prove that it's in God. It's not in power. It's not in wealth. It's not in pleasure. And all of those other goods we posit or confuse with being our ultimate good. I give a talk on Boethius. He has a great reflection on this. Aristotle does as well. From a philosophical perspective of man discovering that it's only in God that his ultimate desires can be fulfilled. But now, we know that then the will desires this necessarily. But the will is also free. And how do we discover this? How do we discover that the will is free? Well, we make choices. We sometimes are frustrated as we deliberate. Should I do this? Should I do that? But how is, let me ask you, the determinate nature of our will, which is to goodness universally, how does it provide the context for freedom? Well, how can we say that one good is better than another if we didn't know what goodness is generically? Okay? If something's better than something else, we have to in some way know what is goodness in order to make a comparison between goods. And so the very determinate nature of our will provides the context for our freedom, okay? Our ability to compare goods. This animals do not do. Just to show you, okay, the variability of man, okay, when presented with something, okay. I remember this story, okay, I'll be brief because I have a few more things to say and I got a 5-minute card just about, I'll say 5 seconds ago. And there's a priest friend of mine, okay, and he was walking his dog in Berlin. And he came into some dark alley and there was some massive growling dog that cornered them and was slowly walking toward him. Now, what did he do and what did his dog do? His little pooch was just like trying to run away. He grabbed it, and he thought about running away. Should I run? What should I do? But he deliberated, okay? Animals, when they experience something as good or harmful, their response is automatic. Once they know something is good, their response is automatic. There is no deliberation, okay? And so he said, as he deliberated, what would give us the best chance of success? And then he discovered what it might be. And so he picked up his dog, and he said, okay, Fido. You know, I don't think that was his name, but anyway. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. And on the count of 3, he threw his dog in the air and he leapt at this other dog. And the other dog was, what is coming at me? It's like, there's like 6-legged weird thing. And he was kind of like, that was enough for him. And it took the edge off of the moment. You know? And they were victorious and able to kind of move. Yeah, I think he might have, let's just say he caught him too. He's very, very gifted. And then whoosh, snagged the dog out of the air and they went walking down the street. So man has this unique ability to deliberate. Because he knows his ultimate good, he can compare goods and evaluate them against that standard. Now, what is the relation then with our rational appetite and our sense appetite, our passions? And this is something that I wish I could speak more on. This is very, very exciting, and I think good news. Now, our passions, our emotions, are they good or evil? Thomas says neither. They're neutral in and of themselves. That you have emotional responses of themselves is neutral. Animals' emotions are not blameworthy or meritorious. But ours are if they come under the influence of the will, which has ultimate say over what we do. Now, if you're not yet convinced,
as Christians, express our good in the face of this negative glacier of people who see this negative good, this hostile negative good that's approaching us. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I believe so. It's a general question. It's an important question, and I'll answer it in broad strokes. With holiness and courage, with holiness and courage is the way I think we have to respond. You respond by going about the business that you feel in good conscience God has for you to do on earth, and that you're bound by Him to do. And when there's a conflict between what you feel bound to do by conscience and what someone else, some extrinsic force, is trying to prevent you to do, when it's in conflict with what you feel you ought to do in good conscience, a good informed conscience, then you have to have the courage to do it anyway. I think at the end of the day, you have to have the courage to be faithful to God. And you have to have the courage to be faithful to the truth, natural truth, revealed truth, and also to what God is calling each of us to in our own conscience, and to be faithful to Him, even in spite of those times when what we feel called to do in conscience is in conflict with what's being asked of us.
At the end of your talk, you
Yeah.
said how the will is inviolable, like you
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
be forced to do something. How does that exactly jive with the theory of
Yeah.
the middle theory of man as a composite of body and soul? Because it seems
Yeah.
as if, you're forced to do something and it's an action of your entire being, then your will is in some way, shape, or form being violated.
Yeah. I think I do understand that question. It's a good question. When I say it cannot be violated, it does not mean it cannot be influenced. Okay? So we can be moved. Okay? But if we ultimately, in terms of the actions we perform, unless we consent to being moved, okay, in the way we are being suggested to move by our passions, then we will not do that act. Okay. Now, it's true that there's some powers that don't come under the influence of the will. Okay, and those would be our nutritive powers. Okay, those powers of nutrition, circulation of our blood, and so forth. I mean, that is part of who we are as a man, and those powers don't come under the influence of the will. Okay, and so that's fully true. But with our other powers, and I think it can speak from experience, there is a conversation, okay, in some ways between them and our will, and they persuade, sometimes very fervently. But if, in spite of their fervent encouragement and prompting, that we reject doing what they encourage us to do, that's the end of the story. And that's what it means to be inviolable. Yeah.
Within this philosophy of man, what are the effects of original sin?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, and I am, just so you all know, my training is in philosophy, so whenever I say anything theologically, even my little homilet, fervorina, whatever you want to call it at the beginning of the hour, all of that you can take with a big grain of salt, you know. But you know, I am a believer as well, and you know, and I try to relate my faith and reason together, and so we can speak to that. So as a philosopher and a believer, there is a clouding of our mind and an effect that the original sin has had on our will that obscures our vision of God as our end, okay, and that also prevents us from doing good with ease, okay. And thus we need, again, and this is the importance of building up virtue. Because before we build up virtue, we have no platform to do good with ease. Okay, and that's what virtue gives us. It's like with working out or getting up in the morning. At first, it's really, really, really hard to get up in the morning. But after you do that good act with repetition, it becomes easy. It can become easy. Some people are like, no. Yeah, keep doing it. Yeah, Francis, keep doing it. Eventually, you'll prove me right, you know. Like, yeah, it's like, you know, maybe 5 minutes after you're dead, you know. When God raises you, yeah, then it'll be easy. Yeah. This is for, yeah. How about easier? Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll see. But again, original sin has certainly clouded our intellects, and it prevents us again from readily seeing our end and ordering our acts in accord with that end. And that's why, I mean, just in all seriousness, so in the first question of the Summa, Thomas says something really interesting. He said there's a moral necessity that God reveal himself for man. Why? Because man needs to get to God, and he needs to know what to do to get there. And he says that man, in terms of even discovering that God is his end, which we already stated, is not conscious to everybody, something that Thomas says that people only come to naturally without the help of revelation. It's only known by a few. And even then, after a long time, and with an admixture of air. Okay? And yet, we need to know right away what to do. And so for us to get to where we're going, there was a moral necessity for man, for God to reveal himself. And so it's true that philosophy can kind of come to some of these conclusions on its own, but it's not easy. And some people don't even have the time or leisure to do it. You're busy farming, you're busy taking care of your family, to study philosophy and theology, to know St. Thomas's proofs for the existence of God. These take time, and they're difficult. Even those proofs are misunderstood by so many people, even professional philosophers. So that speaks to the moral necessity. For man, he needs God's revelation to really know what his end is and to act accordingly. But then what's nice about it, then, we see that what we discover even by rationally thinking is that how we're made is in accord with what God intends for us as well. And we find, what God has revealed about man's life morally is compatible and highly complementary with our own musings upon our nature that we and sometimes other great thinkers have done philosophically. So it's a good question.
Where do you place the primacy of conscience? Intellect or will? Question.
It's in the yeah. It's a good question. The conscience is something that's primarily intellectual. It's primarily intellectual. We speak of forming one's conscience. Okay. We form our conscience by reflecting on what we should do. Now, what we should do, knowing that, is knowledge of the intellect in its practical function. Okay. Now, the intellect is very interesting bird. Okay. We have an agent and possible intellects that allow us to know the essence of material things. But we also have the intellect which knows speculative truth, things that are good in themselves. And then they also know practical truth. Ethics, political science, economics, other forms of art deal with the praxis, the acting of man. In other words, it's the knowing of truth for the sake of action. And so that's the use of the intellect in its practical function. However, we discover some of that through practice. Through making choices and reflecting on them, we are able to better know what to do. And that's just the basic human experience. Aristotle says that the young people shouldn't do ethics, or they struggle with ethics. One, they're too influenced by their passions, and two, they haven't had enough lived experience to really have practical wisdom. And so it's in experiencing, in willing and acting, that we actually do discover better how we should act, and it deals with how we should act. So it's primarily an intellectual function, the intellect in its practice, in the practical function of the intellect, not its speculative functions. But that knowledge comes from an evaluation of what we have willed to do.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Okay. Thank you.